I wonder if I have a magic talent, Chester mused, sounding a trifle guilty. His transition from obscenity to pride was indeed a difficult one. If you won the prize, you could find out, Bink pointed out. The cactus brightened. That's right. That was evidently an unanswerable question. Oh, fuck. This was evidently the unanswerable question Chester had in mind, unvoiced. Then the cactus dulled. But Cherie would never let me have a talent. Not even a little one. She's awfully prudish about that sort of thing. Bink remembered the filly's prim attitude and nodded. Cherie the centaur was one fine figure of a filly, and well able to handle the general magic of xanth. But she could not abide in any centaur. It reminded Bink of his own mother's attitude about sex in young humans. For animals it was natural, but when something like a wild oat nymph was involved, well, Chester did have a problem. They turned another corner. Corners abounded in this infernal maze. And there was the palace gates, shining beyond the drawbridge over the moat. Let's go over there before the maze changes. They ran towards it, but as they did, the hedge pattern shimmered and fogged. That awful thing about the puzzle pattern was its instability. At irregular intervals it shifted into new configurations, so that it was impossible to solve it methodically. They were going to be too late to break out. I'm not stopping now, Chester cried. The sound of cactus galloping became louder. Get on my back! Bink didn't argue. He made a leap for the prickliest portion of the cactus, grimacing in half expectation of a crotch full of needles. He landed neatly on Chester's back, which felt quite equine. Phew. At the feeling of that impact, Chester accelerated. Bink had ridden a centaur before, when Cherie had kindly given him a lift, but never a powerful horse like this. Chester was husky, even by centaur standards. And now he was in a hurry. The huge muscles pulsed along his body, launching him forward with such ferocity that Bink was afraid he would be hurled off as fast as he had landed. But he clutched two handfuls of mane and hung on, confident that his talent would protect him, even from this. Few residents of Xanth were aware of Bink's talent, and he himself had been ignorant of it the first 25 years of his life. This was because the way the talent clouded itself, hiding from publicity. It prevented him from being harmed by magic. But anyone who knew... Yes, Bink agreed. But it was not a good pun. Centaurs didn't eat hay. Despite... I just got the joke. Despite what detractors might imply. They moved to the castle, and the illusions faded. The spell was off. Here they were themselves again, man and centaur. You know, I never realised how homely my face was. Oh no, that's Chester speaking. Bollocks. You know, I never realised how homely my face was until I saw it on you, Chester said musingly. But you have the exceedingly handsome posterior, Bink pointed out. True, the centaur agreed, mollified. I always said Cherie didn't become my mate for my face. Bink started to laugh, but realised his friend was serious. Also, they were at the entry now, and others were within earshot. The guard at the palace gate frowned. How many did you guess, Bink? He inquired, pad poised for a note. One, Crombie, Bink said, indicating Chester. Then he remembered the manticore. Two, rather. You're in for a running, then, Crombie said. The leading contest has 12. He glanced at Chester. You? Oh, but I don't want the prize anyway, Chester said gruffly. You folk haven't been trying, Crombie said. If I'd been out there instead of stuck here running errands for the Queen. I thought you liked this job, Bink said. He had first encountered Crombie when the man soldiered for the Prior King. Oh, I liked it. But I like adventuring better. The king's okay, but... Crombie scowled. Scowled. Well, you know the Queen.
All fillies are difficult, Chester said. It's their nature, they can't help it, even if they want to.
Right you are, Crombie agreed heartily. He was the original woman hater. Just casually refer to someone as a woman hater, that's fine. And the other ones with the strongest magic. Who else would have dreamed up the idiocy of a masquerade? She just wants to show off her sorcery.
She hasn't got much else to show off, Chester said. The king pays no attention to her.
Ah, the king's one smart magician, Crombie agreed. When she's not making mischief like this, the palace guard duty is dull as hell. I wish I were out on a man's mission. Like the time when Bink and I... Bink smiled reminiscently. Wasn't that Technicolor hailstorm something? Wasn't that Technicolor hailstorm something? We camped out under a quiescent tangle tree. And the girl ran off. Those were the days. Surprised, Bink found himself agreeing. The adventure had not seemed like fun at the time, but in retrospect there was a certain twilight luster. You told me she was a threat to me. Well, she was. She married you, didn't she? Bink laughed, but it was a trifle forced. We'd better to get in before the refreshments are gone. He turned and almost stumbled over another little mound of dirt. You've got moles in the palace ground? He inquired with a certain edge. Crombie squinted at the dirt. I wasn't there a moment ago. Maybe a magic mole was attracted to the party. I'll notify the groundskeeper when I get off shift. Bink and Chester moved on in. The palace ballroom was decorated by Queen Iris, naturally. It was an undersea setting with streamers of seaweed rising from the rocky depths. The brightly coloured fish swimming through the barnacles on the walls. Here and there, subaqueous branches of fine white sand. Subaqueous beaches of fine white sand, which shifted location magically, so that if a person stood still, the scenery would come to him. A large serpentine sea monster coiled around the entire area, the pulsing, convoluted coils showing here and there in lieu of walls. Chester glanced around. She's a bitch, but she shows off. But I have to admit, she's a bitch, and she shows off. But I have to admit, her magic is impressive. I'm worried about the quantity of food, if there isn't enough. There turned out to be no danger of shortage. The refreshments were mountainous, and under the personal guard of Queen Iris, she had a picklepus on a leash. Whenever someone had the temerity to take a delicacy, the picklepus pickled it. No one eats until the grand prize is awarded, Iris announced, glancing about. Since she had garbed herself in the warrior queen mermaid, complete with a spiked crown, trident, and powerful tail, and the power of the trident, the points of the trident glistened with a coating of slime that was probably an illusion too, but might possibly be genuine. This was an effective enough deterrent, even without the picklepus. Bink and Chester separated, mixing with the other guests. Just about every creature of note in Xanth was present, except Chester's filly Sherry, who was no doubt wrapped up with the colt, and Bink's chameleon, wrapped up in her misery, and the good magician Humphrey, who never socialized voluntarily. Bink spotted his father Roland, down from the North Village. Roland was careful not to embarrass him by any overt show of affection. They shook hands.
My shoes?
This was nevertheless a miscue after the scene with Chameleon. Fresh from the tree, Bink said awkwardly.
What have you been doing these past few months?
Bubbles rose from Roland's mouth, as if he'd spoken underwater. When Queen Iris put on an illusion, it was some illusion. Ordinary citizens with their motley individual magic talents could only look upon the works of the sorceress and despair, which was, of course, why the Queen was putting on a show. All practicing with the sword, till in the garden, that sort of thing, Bink said.
I understand Chameleon is expecting momentarily.
That's true, Bink said, and again experiencing the frustration of his situation.
A son will help fill the house.
Provided it turned out to be a normal, talented son. Bink changed the subject. We have a delicate young lady's slipper plant, just blossoming. I think it'll bear its first pair of slippers soon.
The ladies will be pleased, Roland said.
Gravely.
The ladies will be pleased,
Roland said gravely. Exactly as if this were significant news. Suddenly, Bink realized he had very little to show for the past year. What had he accomplished? Virtually nothing. No wonder he felt out of sorts. The illusion dimmed, as if dusk were falling, causing the sea to darken too. But the diffuse daylight was replaced by nocturnal phosphorescence. The flotation sacks of the seaweed glowed like little lamps, and the neon coral was brightly outlined in assorted colours. Even the puffy sponges emitted wan beams. Wan beams, that's a word. The animal life had sharper light, electric eels flashing searchlight beams, and assorted fish shone translucently. The overall effect was bewilderingly beautiful.
If only the Queen's personality were as excellent as her taste, Roland murmured, referring to the Queen.
But, we shall now award the door prize, Queen Iris announced. She glowed most of all, streams of light emanating from the points of her crown and trident, and her beautifully bare mermaid torso was clearly outlined. She was the mistress of illusion. She could make herself as lovely as she chose, and she chose well.
I understand it was a marriage of convenience,
Roland continued. Though no magician himself, Roland was the king's regent north of the Gap, and did not hold royalty in awe.
It must be extremely convenient at times.
Bink nodded, slightly embarrassed by his father's evident appreciation of the well-displayed illusory charms of the Queen. The man was bordering on 50, after all. Yet it had to be true. The king professed no love for the Queen, and governed that temperamental woman with the subtly iron hand that amazed those who had known Iris before her marriage. Yet she thrived under that discipline. Those who knew the king well understood that not only was he a more powerful magician than she, he was also a stronger person. In fact, it looked as if the magic land of Xanth had its most effective king since the fourth wave of Rugna, the builder of the castle. Already formidable changes were occurring. The magic shield that had protected Xanth from intrusion had been removed. The mundane creatures were allowed to cross the border. The first to cross had been mundanes of the king's former mundane army. They had been settled in wilderness regions and were becoming productive citizens of Xanth. The requirement that each citizen demonstrate a magic talent had been abolished, and to the amazement of some conservatives, chaos had not resulted. People were becoming known and respected for their total qualities, not just the accident of their magic. Selected parties were exploring nearby mundane areas where no magic existed. The outlying guard posts were being established so that no invasion could happen by surprise. The king had not destroyed the shield stone. He would restore the shield if it were ever needed. At any rate, Bink was sure King Trent had an eye for all things good and useful, including the flesh of the fair woman. And the Queen was his to command. Lord, how many people in this book are horny? Ugh. She could and would be anything the king wished, and he would not be human if he did not avail himself of this. At least on one occasion. The queen was. What did he want? What? The question was, what did he want? This was a commonplace speculation, and the prevailing opinion was that the king wanted variety. The queen seldom appeared in the same guise twice. "Palace guard, your report," the queen demanded peremptorily. Soldier Crombie came forward slowly. He was resplendent in his palace uniform, every inch the soldier in a kingdom that hardly needed soldiers. He could fight well and savagely with a sword or bare hands, and did not like serving as lackey to a woman, and he showed it. Therefore she enjoyed ordering him around. But she could not push him too far, for his loyalty was for the king, and the king's favour lay on him.
"The winner,"
Crombie began, consulting his notes. "No, not that way, you idiot!" she exclaimed, bolting him out with a cloud of diffusing dye. More illusion, of course, but quite effective. "First you give the runner-up, then you give the winner. Do something right for a change." Crombie's scowling face emerged from the thinning dye.
"Woman!"
He muttered. "Oh, woman!" He muttered with casual, I don't know that word. The queen smiled, enjoying his ire.
"The runner-up with 9 correct identifications is..."
He scowled again.
"Bianca of the North Village."
"Mother!" Bink breathed, surprised.
She always did enjoy guessing games," Roland said with pride. "I think you inherit your intelligence as well as your looks from her."
"And my courage and strength from you," Bink said, appreciating the compliment. Bianca walked sedately to the stage area. She was a handsome woman who, in youth, had been beautiful, and unlike the queen, was genuine. Her talent was the replay, not illusion. "Do you distaff proves itself again?" "Oh, so the distaff?" I don't know that word either. "So the distaff proves itself again," the queen said, smirking at Crombie, the woman-hater. "The prize is..." She paused. "Dolman, fetch the second prize. You should have it ready." Crombie's scowl became truly ominous. But he walked to the cabinet, half concealed by seaweed, and brought out a covered container. "The prize is..." the queen repeated, then whipped off the cover. "A potted snapdragon." There was a murmur of well-meaning awe and envy from the ladies present at the plant's several flowered heads, flexing about on their stems, snapping viciously. Snapdragons were very good for eliminating insect and animal pests, and served as useful guards for the house. Woe to the intruder who stepped in or near such a plant. But they didn't take readily to potting, so that was a special and rather difficult spell. It was necessary to combine them. Thus wild snapdragons were common enough, but potted ones were rare and much prized. Bianca showed her pleasure as she accepted the plant, turning her face away with a smile, as if the little dragon head snapped at her nose. Part of the process included a spell to render the plant harmless to its owner, but it took a while for it to get to know that owner. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you, Queen Iris." Then, diplomatically, "You're beautiful too, but not the same way." The queen snapped her teeth in mock imitation of the snapdragon, then smiled graciously. "Tablished, that's a word. and reputable citizens as Bianca, for Iris had lived in semi-exile for years before assuming the crown. Very strange. Now the top winner. Servitor, she said to Grumpy, this time give it some flair, if you have any.
The winner, with 13 correct identifies, Grumpy drawled without flair, is Millie the Ghost.
And he shrugged as if to express bemusement, as yet another female success. She'd made the count, so he knew the contest wasn't rigged. Oh, he had made the count, so he knew the contest wasn't rigged. However, it was generally understood that the men had not been trying very hard. The pretty, young-seeming ghost floated up. She was in her fashion both the youngest and the oldest of Castle Rugna's inhabitants. She had been in her teens when she had died over 800 years before. When Bink first saw her, she had been a formless blob of vapour, but since the occupancy of the castle by mortals, she had shaped up until her outline was firm and slightly as though and slightly as that of any living woman. She was a very sweet ghost, well liked by all, and there was applause at her victory. And the grand prize, the Queen spread her hands dramatically, a certificate for one free answer from the good magician Humphrey. There was background fanfare, punctuated by magically augmented applause, as she handed the paper to the ghost. Millie hesitated. Having no substance, she couldn't actually carry the certificate. It's all right, the Queen says. I'll just write your name on it. The good magician will know it's yours. In fact, he's probably watching us through his magic mirror at this moment. Why don't you ask your question now? Millie's reply was inaudible, for she could hardly speak above a whisper. Don't be concerned. I'm sure everyone will be glad to help. Here, I'll write it down on a magic slate. The good magician can respond the same way. She gestured to Crombie. Flunky, the slate! Crombie paused, but his curiosity made him go along with it. He fetched the slate. The Queen conscripted the nearest centaur, who happened to be Chester. Chester was trying, without success, to sneak a cookie from the refreshment table without it having pickled. He transcribed the ghost's inaudible words. Centaurs were literate, many of them were teachers, so writing chores fell naturally on them. Chester did not like the Queen's attitude much better than Crombie did, but he also played along. What possible question could a ghost have for the magician? He wrote in flourished capitals, How can Millie live again? There was more applause. The guests liked that question. It was a challenging one, and the answer, given publicly, might prove insightful for them all. Usually, the good magician's answers were cost a year's service, and were given only to the one who asked. This party was getting interesting. The words disappear, as if erased by an invisible sponge. Then the magician's answer showed. The requirements are threefold. First, you must have a true will to become mortal. It was evident that Millie did. She gestured imploringly at the slate to continue, so that she could know whether the other requirements were similarly easy or impossible. Technically, as the common saying went, nothing was impossible with magic, but in practice some spells were prohibitively difficult. Bink yearned with her. He'd once longed as ardently for a magic talent upon which his citizenship, welfare, and self-respect had depended. To one who had died prematurely, but not experienced what a tremendous hope mortality might be. Of course, if Millie lived, she would also die, in due course, but really she would be completing the life she had started so many centuries ago. As a ghost, she was in hiatus, unable to affect her destiny materially, unable to love and fear and feel. Well, no, Bink corrected himself. Obviously she felt, but not in a fashion physical people did. She could not experience bodily pleasure or pain. Second, Slate continued, you must have a spell doctor restore your talent to optimum potency. Is there a spell doctor in the house? The Queen inquired, looking about, her points flashing. No? Very well. Errand boy, point out the nearest spell doctor. Crombie started a snarl, but again was overcome by curiosity. He closed his eyes and activated his own talent, spun about and his extended arm. It came resting on its northest point. That would be the Gap village, the Queen said. There was a spell on the Gap that rendered the giant crevice that separated Xanth into the northern and southern sectors unmemorable, but a spot counterspell had been applied to the castle so its inhabitants and visitors could remember such a thing. The king would have trouble governing properly if he could not remember so critical a feature of the landscape as the Gap. Where is our transporter?
On my way, Your Highness,
the man said. He sighted along a line Crombie was pointed, concentrated, and suddenly an old woman stood before them. She looked about, bewildered by the people and the water, for they were still in the undersea illusion. You are a spell doctor? The Queen demanded. Yes, the older woman agreed. But I don't do no doctoring for foolish people sunk in the ocean, especially when I get yanked from my laundry without a... This is King Trent's coronation anniversary celebration ball, the Queen said haughtily. Now you have a choice, old crone. Doctor one spell for us, and have the run of the party and all the food and fun you want, in a costume like this. The old woman was abruptly garbed in like a matron of honour, courtesy of the Queen's illusory magic. Or don't doctor the spell, and this creature will pickle you. She held up the pickle-puss, who hissed eagerly. The old woman, like Crombie and Chester, looked rebellious, but decided on expedient course. What spell? Millie's spell, the Queen said, indicating the ghost. The spell doctor studied Millie, then cackled. It's done, she said, smiling broadly as all four of her teeth showed.
I wonder what's so funny, Roland murmured. Do you know what Millie's talent is?
Ghosts don't have talents, Mick said.
Her spell in life, it must be something special.
Must be. I guess we'll find out if she's fulfilled the third requirement.
Requirement the third, the slate finished. Immerse your skeleton in a healing elixir.
We have plenty of that, the Queen said. Lucky. The soldier was already on his way. In a moment he returned with a bucket of elixir. Now, where is your skeleton? The Queen demanded. But at this point, Millie balked. She seemed to be trying to speak, but was unable. A silence spell. You aren't permitted to tell us where it is. That's why it's remained hidden all these centuries. Millie nodded sadly. This is better yet. We shall have a treasure hunt, in which closet is Millie's skeleton, a special prize for whoever finds it first. She pondered fleetingly. I'm out of regular prizes. I know. The first date with Millie, the mortal.
But what if a woman finds it? Someone asked.
I'll have my husband, the king, change her into a man for the occasion, the Queen said. There was an uneasy laugh. Was she joking? Was she serious? As far as Bink knew, the king could transform any living thing into any other living thing of the same sex. But he had never used his talent capriciously, so it must be humour.
What about the food? Said Chester.
That's it, she decided. The women have already proven their superiority, so they'll be barred from the treasure hunt. They'll start on the refreshments while the men go look for. But she saw Chester swelling and realized she had gone too far. Oh, all right. The men can eat too, even those with appetites like horses. But don't touch the anniversary cake. The king will serve that. When the treasure hunt is over, she looked momentarily pensive, which was unusual for her. Was she sure the king would perform? The cake was magnificent, tier on tier of scintillating icing, embroidered with a huge number 1, crowned with a magically lifelike bust of King Trent. The Queen always promoted the king's glory, because her own glory was reflected in it. Some poor chef had spent a lot of effort organising the magic for this ornate pastry. Picklepuss, stand guard over the cake, and pickle anybody who doesn't touch it, the Queen said, fastening the end of the puss's leash to the leg of the cake's table. Now, men, on with the treasure hunt. Roland shook his head. Skeletons in the closet.
Skeletons in the closet are best left undisturbed, he remarked. I believe I will go congratulate your mother.
He glanced at Bink.
You will have to represent our family in the treasure hunt. You don't have to search too hard.
He made a little gesture of parting and moved off through the glowing currents of the sea. Bink stood in place a moment, reflecting. It was evident his father knew there was something wrong, but was not commenting directly. And what was wrong? Bink knew he had a good life, now with a fine if variable wife, and the favour of the king. Why did he dream of adventures in far places, using swords whose art he'd been studying, of danger and even death, though he knew his talent would protect him from all genuine threats? What was the matter with him? It somehow seemed he'd been happier when his future was in doubt, but that was ridiculous. Why wasn't Chameleon here? She was near term, and but she could have attended the ball if she had wanted to. There was a magic midwife on the palace staff. He decided, on with the treasure hunt. Maybe he could prove himself by locating that skeleton in the closet. And that's the end of chapter 1. Have a good one.